friends. So we're getting very real in this week's episode, from getting Bali Belly to having histamine flare up to taking care of a sick stray kitten. I've been feeling thrown off. This podcast episode is a bit of a story time, but by the end of all of that, I realized that I didn't skip a beat on my nutrition. And I maintained my shape, no problem, which I'm gonna share how I did that so easily with all of the chaos, because we'll all have some off weeks. So let's get into it. And really quick, before we do that, this also aligns to the whole story though. Right now, my program, Build Your Baseline, is open for enrollment. So if you haven't heard me talk about Build Your Baseline before, it is something that I've run a couple times before and it has been requested that I run again. Build Your Baseline is different than my Create Your Shape program. So you've probably heard me talk about my Create Your Shape program. That is my 4-month nutrition coaching program. Build Your Baseline is more of a intro compared to that. It is a 3-week nutrition program where we do just that. We focus on building your baseline, building your foundations, and it's still specific for the woman who is lifting weights, who want to look like they lift weights. But maybe you are either not at a point where you're ready to go dive in and fine tune and really be on it with macros, or maybe you have been tracking macros, but you just feel like it's harder than it needs to be. Generally, I find that you need a reset to really get your foundations in place first. So we start on February 9th. So we're getting started very soon and enrollment is open right now. You can go to the link in the show notes to learn more and get signed up. And this isn't just meant to be like, okay, I just do I'm on it for 3 weeks and then I'm not. It really is to set your foundation so it's embedded into who you are for the long term. So it is not just for the 3 weeks. You're going to take what you learn and implement and get coached on well beyond that. But really within those 3 weeks, you will feel just more confident on what to do and that you can do it systematically and really create your nutrition routine that runs on autopilot while building some muscle, being well fed to be able to do that, and tightening up, decreasing body fat. Within 3 weeks, you can decrease about 3 to 5 pounds of body fat. So it is kind of threefold where you are getting your routine in place, you're getting the knowledge in place, but you also are working to improve your shape. So that's what we're doing in Build Your Baseline. All right, let's get into my little story time. So what happened was I got Bali Belly, which if you aren't familiar with Bali Belly, it's pretty common here in Bali. You can't drink the water. I don't drink the water, but the water still gets in food, whether it got cleaned something or something didn't get cooked as well as it should have. It's kind of unavoidable, especially if you're here long enough, and even if you are really, really careful. So I got Bali Belly, which you just get sick, and it's not as bad as terrible food poisoning. It can be, but this was not. And so I was just sick, right? Then after that, I traveled. I went on a girls trip, which was so much fun, but still, when you travel, you're off of your normal routine. Then I got back and I had a bad histamine flare-up. So essentially something that I deal with and I've been trying to figure out, which I'm telling you the details because some of you guys might be get a clue or be able to relate. So during ovulation, when estrogen increases, my estrogen triggers an overload of histamine, which the histamine can be rashes, things like that, or it can be go through the blood-brain barrier and you just get bad mental issues, you feel like your head is an elephant and just sitting on the rest of your body. So with extreme fatigue, come on, Jenny, get off the couch. Come on, stand up. You got this. Come on, go to the next room. You are just down bad, and brain fog. So you kind of can't think clearly. You just feel so weak. I went to the gym, even though I clearly was not in a good space to go to the gym. I was okay, the gym always makes me feel better. I'm going to go. And I felt awful there, just so weak. Just hard to contract the muscle. You're already just don't feel good. And kind of think of it, when you have the flu, your body fills up with histamine and it just shuts down. It's very similar, except I just don't have the flu. It's just caused from a different kind of pathway. So, needless to say, you feel awful. And so I felt awful. And that happens and it kind of like ramps up and then ramps back down, but over like a week and a half, right? Not fun, especially when it can happen every month. But I learned more and more, and it doesn't always happen. So I just have to share kind of that part that happened that really threw me off. And during this, we found a stray kitten. If you saw on my Instagram stories, you kind of were following along with the stray kitten journey. But speaking of kitten, here is another kitten we have. If you're watching the video, you see she just popped into the screen. Okay, so while all this was going on, we were taking care of a kitten, the stray kitten that we found at our neighbor's yard, who was only 5 weeks old. Like, if we left it out there, it would die, because obviously they also get Bali Belly because they're just drinking the water that's out there. There's so many stray dogs that would kill it. There's so many other diseases. And so we took it, and then obviously getting food is a struggle. So we captured it, we took it in. It was feral, right? So capturing it was a whole thing. And it has to stay separate from the rest of the animals in our house, the rest of the other cats in the house. So it's in its own like bathroom space. And so I had to gain its trust over this time. And to do that, you just have to spend time with it in the same room. So it's like 4 to 5 times per day, I'm going into this room and I'm just sitting in there for like 20, 30 minutes at a time and just feeding it daily, like trying to build its trust. And then building its trust, once I did, and it learned about cuddles, and it was like, oh, this is nice. And it just wanted to cuddle me nonstop, which was so great and so sweet. But then once it gets comfortable and it's like, okay, I'm getting fed, I'm getting cuddles. I mean, it was so skinny. It was just super malnourished. That's when the immune system can kind of like be able to take a break. Cortisol can come down, same as a human, right? And that's when sicknesses can really show their symptoms. And so we noticed that he was getting lower energy, and so I took it to the vet now that I felt comfortable like transporting it on the scooter, and it, I could take it and kind of give the vet an update. So it got tons of testing done, and it turned out it did have the feline disease, which is pretty common, but in a rough condition when you're also malnourished and dehydrated. It also had parasites, which again is pretty common when you are living outside as a kitten. And then it also had essentially Bali Belly from living outside. So kind of rough. Gave it its medicine, and the next morning I walked in to find it like sprawled out on the ground and just diarrhea everywhere, barely breathing. And I immediately took it to the emergency vet. And I mean, they did everything they could. And I didn't know they did this, but they do CPR on kittens. So the kitten was 0.9 pounds, right? So very, very tiny. They were doing CPR, but unfortunately it did not make it, which that's kind of my first experience. I've rescued like 5 kittens, and that's my first experience when I've been there for something like that. So that was pretty traumatizing. It's been now a week since then. I'm feeling much better about it and glad that we got to give it the love we did for that week. But just to kind of show you that, things were chaotic during this week. And then the final thing I'll add is, in addition to like trying to take care of the kitten and then the kitten passing and that just being like very traumatizing your day, we get home, my other cat is on the roof, and it's been on the roof now. I think it's like the 4th or 5th time over the past week or two while all of this is going on. And that may be fine in like a normal house, but in Bali, all the roofs are all connected. So then it can just go on and go to the neighbors, which it did do that. Unfortunately, I have a tracker on it so I can see where it goes. But the risk is just so high between the other dogs and cats and diseases. One time it was up there, I heard it get in a fight with another cat. And so it's just not safe enough. And especially after this kitten passed away, it's just kind of like can't tolerate it anymore, because every other day, like, she can't get down. So I'm taking the ladder. I'm trying to find a different spot in our like compound to climb up on the roof, which is not like, I would say most people would not do that. I feel I feel pretty agile and like a climber, and I'm not afraid of heights, so I can do it. But like Aaron's not gonna do it because he just doesn't feel like he's capable of that, or maybe he could, but like is like doesn't feel like it's worth it at this stage. And so I'm getting up there. I've got to chase her. I've got to bait her in. I've got to put her back down. Like it's a whole thing. And it's generally like 30 minutes to an hour of your day. Meanwhile, feeling awful with this histamine flare up in trying to take care of this kitten. And there were, I think, 2 times when it's just downpouring. And so I'm trying to like do this on the rain, and the ladder's like slippery, just kind of a mess. So needless to say, I felt very thrown off during all of this. Hopefully you guys are just, I share all of this not for like pity at all, because I think this is all just part of life. That's really not the point at all. The point is to just have some relatable stories to tell, and hopefully if you've had a rough time, or the next rough time you have, you can be like, okay, yeah, like this is part of life, this happens. That's really the point of why I'm sharing this. However, I realized after all of this that I like maintained my physique and my nutrition, and I didn't even think about it. Like it wasn't like, oh, I like really need to get back on top of it. I refused to go to the grocery store during all of this because I just physically didn't have the energy for it. At one point, I even like ran out of my like backup options, and I just, if you saw that on my stories, you're like girl, go to the grocery store. I just physically, mentally, like did not have the capacity for it, and I was like thinking back on it, I'm like, wow, like I'm really proud of myself though, because it didn't, like I realized after the fact that I was able to maintain no problem, like it wasn't a stress at all, whereas past me would have like not been able to do that. I just wouldn't have even had the like I wouldn't have had like the knowledge of the routine or anything to be able to do that. And so back in the day, what would happen was, if anything like overwhelming or like chaos happened, or what just seemed like a time where I was thrown off, or I had like zero energy, then I would have not gone to the store. Definitely there would be no cooking. There's like no like really ordering of food. Even now, I like to order food. It just felt like such a hassle. And just zero mental capacity, where now I'm like holding space for this kitten. Like I was trying to just like focus on getting what I needed to get done with work was my priority, on top of managing the kitten and my cat who like was escaping. And so between those two, like I just didn't have any energy, zero mental capacity. And so something like that would have happened before. I would have definitely just reached for the pantry just for what's quick, convenient, and like processed food. So anything I would have just like opened and just started eating at like random times whenever I felt hungry. I probably also would have just skipped meals. I know I did do that. I would just skip meals because I'm like, okay, it's too much of an effort to eat. I'm just going to skip. And then when I get hungry enough, then I'll just be ravenous for like processed food, whatever I can find in the pantry. And or I would have ordered what was like most convenient, or fast food with either like people around me, or like, oh my gosh, I know this like fast food place, I'll just get that. Like Jack in the Box used to be my go-to. I also would have been focused on just seeking pleasure, because I felt awful. Then my brain would have been like, okay, how can I get pleasure? And that would have been through food for sure. And now this time it was with massages and Emily in Paris. Actually, after the kitten passed and we kind of like calmed down from it all, I was like, okay, I just need some time to just like process, and then I can kind of get back to my day. And Aaron, who was also like distraught, was like, well, how are you going to do that? Like kind of looking for like, I don't know, like a suggestion, or like, oh my gosh, there's a way to do that. And I was like, I'm going to go watch an episode of Emily in Paris. So, that in the past though would have for sure been like, okay, pleasure is going to be food. What is quick and convenient, either like candy and gummy bears or anything like that. So I know back in the day that would have resulted of just being off for those like 2 weeks and being like really off. And so just like underfueled, underfed, but also over calorie consumption, feeling fluffy, definitely would have gained some body fat from just the over eating, even if it didn't feel like I was eating a lot because I was eating like such dense food. And I would have just felt bad about myself and then be like, okay, it's fine, I'll just like get started later. The difference now though, I feel is, when I'm kind of thinking back about it, it's kind of in three categories. The first is my identity, where now I know that like chaos happens, like all these things happen, but I realize that you have to eat anyway. So food is like the chaos doesn't automatically mean bad food. I've kind of like rearranged that just because I feel like I've identified now as someone who is fit, and I kind of see food as separate than anything going on in my life. Like it doesn't matter what's going on in my life, it doesn't change like my foundations with my like food, because I'm trying to think about how to like articulate this better. I guess I used to see it before as like, oh, of course, if like things are off or I'm busy, of course I can just use that as kind of as an excuse to have like more convenient options or like be off. But now I realize that the two are just uncorrelated. I've got to eat anyway. Anything that's not like fueling me, it's just kind of an excuse. And I think that's one way I think about it, but also with that, I make sure that I like my food. So going back to the identity, I also have the identity is I'm someone who is fit all the time. I feel very strongly with that identity. It's very important to me. Yeah, I think there's an aspect to like looking fit for sure and having that strong identity, but also being someone who is fit and healthy, like inside and out, and how I feel and how it feels like my energy levels and being healthy, especially when I'm feeling bad. So I know that if I overeat for a week or two, I know I'll gain body fat, right? I've done it enough times. I know how it works. I don't have to like try to trick my brain that that's not how it works. Like I know that's how it works. And then I know that how that feels and how that looks, and I don't want it. So I think that I'm so solid in that I'm like, yeah, that is not who I am, and my identity of like when chaos happens, it doesn't change or like alter how I like think about fueling myself. So that is the first thing, just the identity of that like fit person. The second thing is the knowledge, which it kind of overlaps with some things that I just shared, but I have the knowledge and the understanding of like, what is a balanced meal? Like, what does that include? Like, what types of food does that include? I know that like the back of my hand. I also know how to estimate macros. And it isn't because I'm a nutritionist and like got all these learnings. It's just because I just learned it at a high level and then practiced implementing it. So like estimating macros, I was never taught that. I figured it out, and now I help people like understand. I teach them how to do it, but it's not rocket science, very simple. But going back to this knowledge is like, if I know how to estimate macros, I don't have the capacity, the mental capacity with the chaos going on to track my macros. I can estimate, right? And I don't have to track anything. I don't have to weigh anything, and I can still be really directional to what I actually need to be fueled. I also know that I have the knowledge and the experience to know, like, if I eat processed food, that I'm still going to be hungry, right? It's just so dense that it quickly goes through your body where then you end up hungry. So I know that's going to happen. So processed food now kind of like doesn't do it for me as much, because I just look at it, and I'm even looking at it, I'm like thinking ahead of like, yeah, I'm still going to be hungry. I also just know how much I need per day, and that comes down to just knowing the calories and macros that I need, especially at this phase, to know that I'm well fueled and to know that I'll maintain muscle mass, but also to know I won't gain body fat. So that also feels like having that knowledge kind of leads into the rest of this. The third thing, so the identity is the first thing, the knowledge is the second thing, and then the routine is the third thing. So I eat a certain amount of times per day. So that is routined. And then at those meals, I have a handful of meals that check the box for my macros, like estimated, rounded, right? And it's not like down to the gram and I can't ever have a different meal. Like it's like, way more simplified than that. But I have go-to meals that I love and that are kind of on rotation. And then if I decide to try something different, I know how to still create my plate to still hit what I need. But these like go-to meals are mindless and they are delicious. And I have backup options for these meals. So let's say I have a dinner that I love, steak and potatoes and green beans with chimichurri sauce. But when I think about like a chaotic situation where I'm not going to the grocery store, I have zero mental capacity to cook or make something like that, like I'm not going to have that. I'm going to go with one of my backup options. So for each like snack or meal I have a backup option that takes no effort to cook, that I always have on hand, that makes it super simple, that even when life seems chaotic, I can just go with that backup option. So that's what I was doing. I was using all of my backup options. Like for breakfast, I was doing eggs, sourdough, and fruit, which I always have on hand. I ran out of fruit. So then I just didn't have fruit and I just had the eggs and sourdough. Do I know that like having nutrients in fruits is going to be healthy for me? Yes. But do I also know that calories is king and macros are queen, and I don't need, like, if I don't have fruit for a week, I'll be okay. It's not going to change my body composition. Yeah. So again, going back to that knowledge, apples are my go-to as one of my snacks, and I always have rice crackers on hand. And so when I ran out of apples, I just had my rice crackers. And then for lunch, typically I have like a protein source and like taco meat with taco seasoning, and then Spanish rice and bell peppers to create my plate for a well-balanced meal. But when I ran out of my meal, I just had one of my go-tos, which is oatmeal, protein powder, and frozen blueberries. Create your plate, right? I have my protein, I've got my carb source, I've got my fruit. And so that's also my snack. Sometimes I do cream of rice, but that was like, you have to boil that. And I was just like, there was zero energy to boil anything, was not going to do that at all. So I would literally have this oatmeal bowl twice a day, and it is so good. I love it. It's very comforting to me. I look forward to it, and it takes zero effort. And I know it's a well-balanced meal, and it's the amount of food I need. So it's like, it's perfect, right? And it's not perfect just because it's oatmeal. It's perfect because it is convenient, it tastes good to me, and it is like creates your plate, which everybody can do. And you can always create different meals that check these boxes. And then for dinner, I was either doing some of my go-to deliveries or the oatmeal bowl. I mean, literally some days, generally I was having it twice a day, if not 3 times per day, because I loved it so much and I just could not think. And then when I ran out of that, there was one time where I had sourdough, jam, and peanut butter, and then mixed in protein powder into my coconut yogurt. And again, same thing. Could you count fruit as your, like the jam as your fruit? No, not do that. But so I didn't have like my fruit or my like fiber, right? But I knew I was getting my protein in and my carbs in, and getting some fats in there too. So I felt like I knew I wasn't like digressing progress in terms of health or physique in any way, because I had that like backup option. So I really just thought about like the priority being like my calories and macros to maintain, and then what is my average like carb source that I need at each of these to not over consume and gain body fat. Now, if this sounds confusing or tricky to you, it is because you just have never been taught this. We have never been taught like how to, one, understand what our bodies need to be well fueled, especially if you're a woman who is lifting weights. And then 2, what does that actually look like to be systemized into my life and to be so routine that it's easier to do than not to do. And this really is what like my Build Your Baseline like program, 3-week program is all about. It is setting those foundations of your like identity, your like fit chick identity, and laying that down from the beginning, but then also having just the general knowledge of like, wait, how do I fuel myself? What does that actually look like, and what's important and what's not important? And then from there, taking that and embedding it into your day-to-day of like your daily structure of how many times you're eating per day. How do I create my plate at each meal? And then how do I make sure that it's routined, that I can do it day in and day out, even if I have an off week, even if I travel, even if we have a barbecue or I have a dinner date, or if I'm on vacation, like all of that. And so that's what we do in Build Your Baseline, and it's all geared towards the woman who lifts weights and wants to look like it, but wants to set their foundation to be well fueled. So when you go to the gym, you know you're fueled. When you go to work, you know you have the brain power to get what you need done, and you can still have like a full life outside of that to set your foundation without feeling like, okay, I need to go to like extremes with macro tracking. This is also a great kind of primer to my Create Your Shape program if that is something that you've been looking at or interested in, but it's definitely not something you have to do. I do have people who have done Build Your Baseline and they're like, great, this is what I needed to just be like well fueled and systemize. So it's open for enrollment right now. We get started on Monday, February 9th. You can go to the link in the show notes to join us, and I'll see you next week on the Create Your Shape podcast.